After 5 years. My boyfriend called me a free cow in front of his family, so I took back the house he never paid for. "If the milk is free," he said, grinning across the dinner table, "why would I pay for the cow? Now go graze." Everyone laughed. No one defended me. I did not plan to cry. Not in front of them. Not in that dining room under that chandelier that was much too bright, with the smell of overcooked meat and expensive perfume hanging in the air. But the truth is, I did not cry. I smiled. It was one of those brittle, stretched smiles that hurts your cheeks more than your heart. I sat there in that dining room chair, surrounded by laughter, clinking glasses, and casual cruelty, holding my wine glass like it was the only thing keeping me steady. "If the milk is free," he had said, grinning so wide I could see the filling on one of his molars, "why would I pay for the cow?" Then he looked at me with fake pity, his eyes shining with the delight of being the center of attention. "Now go graze." The table erupted. His father let out a barking laugh. His aunt actually clapped. His sister covered her mouth like she could not believe he had said it, but she kept laughing anyway. And not one person, not one, said a word in my defense. I was not shocked. That was the worst part. I did not gasp. I did not freeze. I did not feel tears burning behind my eyes. I just sat, still, fingers tight around the stem of my wine glass, watching their faces twist with amusement as if I were a character in a sitcom instead of a real person with real feelings. And in that strange silence inside my head, one thought rose above everything else. It is over. Not because he said something cruel. He had said worse in private, though never quite so publicly. Never with that level of open dismissal. Not because they laughed. I had given up expecting warmth from his family years ago. It was because I finally saw everything clearly. There was no ambiguity left to hide inside. No way to explain it away as a joke. No way to deflect it with a smile. No way to tell myself he was just uncomfortable with big gestures, or that he needed more time. The fog lifted all at once. He was never going to marry me. He did not want to. He never had. And worse than that, he did not respect me. Maybe he never had. I excused myself politely and said I needed the restroom. No one stopped me. Why would they? The joke had already passed. They had already moved on to a debate about football and someone's third engagement. I walked down the hallway past the wedding photos lining their walls. All those smiling couples in matching outfits, eyes bright with promise. His cousin had just gotten married the previous spring. Big ceremony, live band, sparkler send-off. I had helped plan it. I had made the flower centerpieces by hand. I locked myself in the bathroom and stared at my reflection. There was lipstick on my teeth. I wiped it away and leaned closer to the mirror, not to cry, just to look, to really see myself. My hair was too flat from the humidity. There was a faint crease under my left eye from laughing too hard earlier in the day. He had made me laugh then. He really had. He could be charming when he wanted to be. Funny, soft, gentle in those private moments when no one else was around. But tonight was not a fluke. It was not a slip. It was a confession. A truth said aloud, dressed up as laughter. I stood there for a long time. Long enough that someone knocked, probably thinking I had passed out or fallen in. I flushed the toilet out of habit and washed my hands just to give them something to do. Then I walked back down the hall. I did not rejoin the table. I told him I was not feeling well. He barely looked up from his plate. "You good to drive?" he asked, his mouth full. I nodded. He nodded back. That was it. I did not leave out of anger. That is important. I was not furious. I was not even hurt in the usual way. It felt more like recognition, like finally seeing something that had been there all along. There was no drama in it, no screaming, just a quiet kind of decision, final and absolute. I drove home in silence, the kind that feels like company. Our house, my house, was still dark when I arrived. He would not be back for hours. He always stayed late when his family gathered. "Too much wine to drive," he used to say. By then, I suspected he just preferred being away from me. I did not pour myself a drink. I did not sit on the couch with a blanket and spiral into self-pity. Instead, I went to the closet and pulled out a box I had tucked away months earlier. It was not full of memories. It was full of documents. Copies of the deed, mortgage statements, my pay stubs, emails from our realtor, all the paperwork that had my name on it and only my name. I had not started collecting them with any grand plan. It began after a conversation we had one night in the kitchen, when I asked him, carefully, gently, if he still saw marriage in our future. He laughed, not in a mean way exactly. More like the idea was mildly ridiculous. Why would we mess with something that's already working? That was his answer. Like we were a wireless plan or a household appliance. After that night, I started noticing things differently. Every bill in my name, every holiday planned by me, every dinner, every grocery run, every repair call. I started keeping track, not obsessively, but with growing awareness. Like a scientist slowly realizing the variables in an experiment. And now the experiment was complete. He had provided the final data point that night without even knowing it. Now go graze. He had said it out loud in front of everyone. It was not just the insult. It was the ease with which he said it. The pride in it. As if I had given him nothing valuable. As if 5 years of my life were just material for a funny anecdote. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was upset, but because I did not want to lose the clarity. It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff and realizing the fall would not hurt because I had already been building wings. The next morning I made coffee. I fed the dog. I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. Everything I would need to do, not to dramatically storm out, but to end it properly. Completely. On my terms. I had been preparing without realizing it. Now I just needed to execute. And this time, I would not say a word beforehand. There would be no fight, no negotiation, no final chance for him to make promises he would never keep. He did not believe I would ever leave. That was his biggest mistake. Let him keep laughing. I had already taken the first step out the door. He moved in 2 years after we started dating. That part always surprises people. They assume we lived together from the beginning, but we did not. He had his own place for a while. A studio apartment in a building with no elevator where the pipes rattled every time someone used the water upstairs. I used to joke that it sounded like a ghost was trying to escape through the walls. He complained about that place constantly. He said it felt like a box with bad lighting and thin walls. I did not mind it so much. It had character. Stories to tell if you listened closely. But when my lease ended, and I mentioned maybe looking for a bigger place, something with an actual yard, he said, "Let's do it together." I remember that day clearly. We were sitting in his car parked outside a sandwich shop, half-eaten lunch on our laps. He said it like it was the most natural progression in the world, like we were already building a life and this was just the next logical step. We searched listings for weeks. Every Sunday we drove through neighborhoods with signs out front, imagining our future behind each door. I was the one taking notes, scheduling viewings, asking about taxes and heating systems. He mostly commented on paint colors and whether the backyard was grill-worthy. When we finally found the house, a pale green ranch-style place with hardwood floors and a deck that caught the afternoon sun, I fell in love with it immediately. It felt safe, quiet. Something about the way the windows faced west made the living room glow in the evenings. We put in an offer the next day. Well, I did. He did not qualify for the mortgage. That was the beginning of the first quiet compromise. I never told anyone, not even my closest friends. When people asked whose name the house was in, I smiled and said, "Ours," because it felt easier than explaining. Because I did not want to make him feel diminished. He said he would catch up later. Once he paid off his student loans and got a promotion at work, we would refinance and add his name to the title. He said it with such confidence, like he genuinely believed it, so I believed it too. It was not supposed to be permanent. I told myself that repeatedly. He did not have much to bring when he moved in. Just clothes, a few books, and a beat-up recliner that never made it past the garage. I bought most of the furniture. The couch, the dining table, the mattress, every dish, every towel, every light bulb. I picked it, paid for it, arranged it. And still, I told myself it did not matter. Those things were just objects. Love was not about who paid for what. We split groceries sometimes. Mostly, I covered them. At first, it was small things. "Can you grab it this time? I left my card at home, or I'll get it next week." But next week always came with a reason. Eventually, I stopped asking him to reimburse me. When the roof needed repairs, I paid. When the washing machine broke, I called the technician and covered the bill. When we needed a new water heater, he said, "Let me know what I owe you." But he never followed up. There was always a logic behind it. He was not being deliberately negligent. He was figuring things out. His job was going through transitions. He was working on a side project. He was waiting for a bonus. I wanted to believe him. More than that, I wanted us to work. I grew up watching my mother manage everything. She handled the bills, the house, the kids, while my father worked late and expected dinner to be ready when he walked in. I told myself I would not become her. I told myself my relationship would be more equitable. But equity is not about splitting receipts 50-50. It is about effort, mutual investment, the sense that both people are showing up with whatever they have ready to build something together. What we had was not that. It looked like partnership on the surface, but underneath, the foundation was always tilted. I used to tell myself that love was about generosity, that if I just gave a little more time, a little more understanding, he would eventually meet me halfway. But halfway kept moving. It was always just one step farther than I could reach. He told his friends we had bought a house together. He liked that phrase. He said it with pride. And I never corrected him, because part of me wanted it to be true. Part of me was still waiting for the version of him who made promises in the car over half-eaten sandwiches. But time does not pause just because you are waiting for someone else to catch up. The days kept moving forward, and I kept investing money, energy, and care, while he coasted on the assumption of balance. Sometimes I would lie awake at night staring at the ceiling fan, turning slow circles, and wonder what would happen if I stopped compensating, if I just stopped covering the gaps. Would he notice? Would he step up? Would he even stay? It was not resentment. Not yet. It was a quiet kind of erosion, like wind wearing down stone. You do not feel it happening, but one day you look down and realize the ground beneath your feet is no longer solid. He still talked about the future. Vacations we would take, renovations we would make, dogs we would adopt. But when I mentioned things that required actual planning, marriage shared finances, legal documents, he would smile and say, "Let's not rush things," as if 5 years was a sprint. And the worst part was, I accepted it. I smiled back. I made myself smaller so he could feel more comfortable. I rationalized, excused, and deflected because admitting the truth felt too painful. I was not in a relationship with delayed commitment. I was in a one-sided arrangement, and I was the only one actually building anything at all. It is easy to lose track of how much you are carrying when you pick things up one at a time. A bill here, a late-night grocery run, an oil change appointment, tracking the property tax schedule, managing the insurance renewal, replacing the smoke detector batteries, ordering the new water filters, fixing the cabinet door that kept falling off its hinges, setting up the holiday decorations, then taking them down and storing them properly because no one else would. It all becomes background noise, tasks you absorb without thinking. Every time I noticed something that needed doing, I did it automatically, quietly, like it was just part of the atmosphere of being in a relationship. Love expressed through logistics. He was not completely unhelpful. That was what made the imbalance harder to recognize. He took out the trash. Sometimes he folded laundry. Sometimes he cooked, usually on weekends, and always the same 3 meals. He played with the dog in the backyard and mowed the lawn when I reminded him. He liked saying we were partners, especially when other people were around. But what we had was not partnership. It was proximity. I was running a household. He was just living in it. The mortgage was in my name. So was the deed. So were all the utilities. Every payment came from my account. At the beginning, he offered to cover the internet and streaming subscriptions. It sounded fair. He called it his contribution. But as time passed, even that became inconsistent. Some months I would get an email saying the card on file had been declined. I would fix it without comment and chalk it up to oversight. We had a system for splitting groceries, one of those shared apps where you log receipts. I logged everything, meticulously. He did not. I reminded him gently. "Oh, right," he would say. "I'll catch up this weekend." He never did. When I bought new furniture, I called it ours. When I rearranged the living room, I asked for his opinion. When something broke, I asked if he wanted to help pick the replacement. He always said, "Whatever you think is best." At first, it felt supportive. After a while, it just felt like indifference. Our bedroom furniture, I bought. All of it. The mattress, I paid for in full. The curtains, the rugs, the bed frame. Me. I told myself it did not matter. Eventually, it would all blur together under the label of ours. But there was no ours. There was only mine and a person who existed inside it, like a guest with permanent privileges. Friends would visit and compliment the house. "You two have done such a great job with this place," they would say. He would smile proudly, as if he had chosen the wall colors or installed the shelving in the pantry. I would nod and say, "Thank you." He never gave me credit. Not once. And I never asked for it, not because I did not want recognition, but because I was afraid of how empty the silence might sound if I did. Some nights I sat at the kitchen table and looked around at everything I had created. The houseplants thriving in their corners, the artwork on the walls, the soft lamp in the hallway that turned on at sunset thanks to a smart plug I had installed myself, all the details I had cared enough to curate. And I would realize that he could disappear tomorrow, and not one thing in that space would bear his fingerprint. There was no evidence of his investment, only his presence. And yet he acted like he belonged to it, like the house was an extension of his comfort. He told his friends they could crash at his place. He called the backyard my grill zone. He invited people over without asking, then retreated to the bedroom while I cleaned, prepared snacks, and played hostess. He liked comfort. He liked convenience. He liked being taken care of. And I, God help me, provided all of it. Not because I was weak or desperate, but because I thought that was what love looked like. I thought consistency would eventually earn commitment. It did not. Whenever I brought up finances, he got uncomfortable. If I suggested combining our money or opening a joint account, he would say, "That's a big step." When I asked if he wanted to discuss long-term planning, he joked that I was trying to turn us into a corporation. Once I left a spreadsheet open on my laptop accidentally. Or maybe not really accidentally. It tracked every home expense from the past year. Mortgage, repairs, insurance, maintenance, even cleaning supplies. I had organized it by category and month. His name did not appear once. He saw it. He said nothing. He was not cruel about any of this. That was what made it so confusing. He did not yell. He did not gaslight me in obvious ways. He did not manipulate with grand dramatic scenes. He simply did not step up. And somehow that was worse because it left me nothing clear to push against. No obvious fight to have. Just the slow suffocation of unspoken imbalance. There were moments when I tried to convince myself I was overreacting, that I was being petty, that I was keeping mental ledgers, that this was just how relationships worked and someone always carried more, that someday we would level out. But love should not feel like bookkeeping. It should not require you to maintain a mental inventory of fairness just to stay sane. And fairness, real fairness, is not about perfect 50-50 splits. It is about reciprocity. It is about care being mutual, about someone seeing your effort and matching it in their own way. He did not see. Or maybe he did, and he simply did not care. I remember one night lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking, if I disappeared tomorrow, what would actually change for him? He had no skin in the game, no real investment, not emotional, not financial, not legal. He lived in a house that was not his, surrounded by furniture he did not buy, eating food he did not purchase, with a woman he had no intention of marrying. And I had let him. For years. Not because I was naive, but because I wanted so desperately to be loved that I ignored every sign that I was just being used. I used to think he was cautious about commitment, that maybe he needed more time, more security, more confidence in us before taking the next step. Some people do fear marriage. I understood that. I did not want to pressure him. I told myself that love is patient, but there is a difference between being patient and being ignored. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being a partner and became a convenience. The first time I brought up getting married, it was not even a real conversation. It was just a quiet moment while we were folding laundry. I said, almost casually, "Do you ever think about what our wedding would look like?" He smiled, kissed my forehead, and said, "Why would I mess with perfection?" I laughed at the time. I thought it was sweet, charming even. He had this way of making non-answers sound affectionate. So I let it go. I let a lot of things go back then. Over the years, I asked again, maybe 4 or 5 times total, always gently, always giving him space to be honest. Every time he found a way to deflect. Let's wait until we're more financially stable. Let's enjoy things the way they are. Marriage doesn't really change anything anyway. It's just a piece of paper. Funny how people who call marriage just a piece of paper are always the ones who benefit from not signing it. I was not just asking for a wedding. I was asking for commitment, for recognition, for acknowledgement that I was not just a convenience in his life, but But the more I tried to have those conversations, the more evasive he became. Whenever things got serious, he redirected. If I brought up practical matters, like making sure he was on healthcare forms or emergency contact lists, he would say, "Is this about the house again?" with that tone, like I was being transactional, as if I had not already funded everything in that house from the foundation to the soap in the guest bathroom. And when I brought up adding his name to the deed, the promise he had made when we bought the place, he waved it off. "Let's not complicate things," he would say. He never actively pursued being added. That was what stuck with me. He never once showed genuine interest in making that change official. It was always on me to bring it up, on me to push for progress, on me to question why nothing ever moved forward. I started realizing he was not afraid of commitment. He just did not want to risk losing what he had, a life funded and organized by someone else without the burden of legal or financial responsibility. He enjoyed all the benefits of a committed relationship: stability, a beautiful home, companionship, someone who cared for him, all without ever having to promise anything in return. And the moment I asked for more security, he acted like I was trying to trap him. The most telling moment came one night while we were watching a romantic comedy. Nothing too deep, just mindless entertainment. At the end, the main character proposed in front of all their friends. The audience in the movie applauded. I glanced over at him, curious about his reaction. He rolled his eyes. I asked what that was about. "Public proposals are so manipulative," he said. I did not say anything. I just nodded. But inside, something clicked. That was not just about the movie. That was how he saw me. Every time I asked for clarity, for partnership, for a future, I was not trying to have a conversation in his mind. I was trying to manipulate him. That is not love. That is entitlement wrapped in charm. And once I saw it, I could not unsee it. It changed how I heard everything. The casual way he said, "Let me know if you need anything from the store," as if groceries magically appeared because of my paycheck. The way he said, "Don't stress about it," whenever a bill was due because he was not the one paying it. The way he said, "It's your house," whenever something broke, but our home when guests came over. He wanted the illusion of a shared life, without any of the structure that required effort or sacrifice. He was comfortable exactly where he was. The idea of changing that, even in a way that honored the years we had spent together, was simply inconvenient. I realized I had been asking the wrong question all along. It was not, "Why will he not propose?" It was, "Why would he?" He had no incentive to change anything. I cooked. I cleaned. I paid the mortgage. I handled the emotional labor. I carried the weight. And in return, he gave me just enough affection, just enough attention, just enough vague future talk to keep me hoping. He was not malicious. But he was perfectly fine with me being unhappy as long as I stayed. And the truth was, I had stayed. I stayed through birthdays where I planned the dinner, bought the gift, and covered the bill. I stayed through holidays spent at his family's house, where I was always just the girlfriend, even after 5 years. I stayed through job changes, financial stress, and medical scares. His health issues, not mine. I always showed up, always gave. But he never once said, "Let's talk about what you need." Not once. The last time I brought up marriage, it was not even intentional. We were in the kitchen loading the dishwasher after dinner. I made an offhand comment about how we still had not figured out logistics for if we ever had kids. Who would handle school pickup? Who would walk the dog during long days? He did not laugh. He just said, "We don't need a contract to prove anything." And that was it. 5 years boiled down to, we do not need a contract. I went upstairs and sat in the bedroom surrounded by the things I had chosen, the furniture I had paid for, the home I had built from scratch. And I realized I was not in love anymore. I was not even disappointed. I was done. He thought I was waiting for a ring. I was not. Not anymore. I was waiting for a reason to leave. And deep down, I think I knew he would eventually give me one. By the time his words reached across that dinner table, "Now go graze," I had already done most of the mental work. The thing people never understand about leaving is that it does not start when you walk out the door. It starts months before, in moments no one notices, in quiet searches conducted after midnight, in files saved with names like miscellaneous documents or April records, in phone calls made during lunch breaks, in the way you stop unpacking all the groceries and instead start mentally calculating how many bags would fit in your car. He had no idea how much I had already detached. Not just emotionally, practically. It started small. I quietly removed my name from subscriptions we both used, saying I wanted to streamline my accounts. I opened a separate savings account at a different bank. I told him it was for budgeting purposes. He barely looked up from his phone. Then I started reviewing my paperwork. I checked my credit report. I reread the deed carefully, line by line, making sure every document was clear about ownership. I gathered proof of purchase for furniture, every maintenance receipt, every improvement I had funded. I built a paper trail, a wall of facts to protect me from any revisionist history later. There is a particular kind of power in preparing without warning. I started taking photos of the house room by room, not for nostalgia, but for documentation, where things were, what I owned, what I had paid for. I backed up important files. I changed passwords on accounts that were solely mine. I stopped sharing certain calendars. I started researching moving companies that offered discreet services. I remember sitting in my car one morning before work, listening to a podcast about strategic business exits, and thinking, this is the same principle. A relationship like ours was a contract in disguise. Only one of us had been honoring the terms. I met with a lawyer quietly. I did not need to file anything dramatic. I just wanted information. I wanted to know what options I had if he tried to contest ownership of anything that was not his. The lawyer reviewed my documentation and said, "You're well protected." That's smart, not paranoid. I kept track of dates. Each time I tried to talk to him about our future, each time he dismissed the conversation, each refusal to engage with fundamental questions about our life together. It was not petty record keeping. It was documentation. So when the time came, I would not question my memory. I would not doubt myself. And then I started looking at apartments not far away. I did not want to flee the city or hide. I just wanted a space that was mine again, a place untouched by shared compromises and unbalanced history. I found a one-bedroom near my office with clean lines, quiet neighbors, and tall windows that let in morning light. I toured it on a Saturday when he thought I was at the gym. The moment I stepped inside, I could breathe differently. I did not sign the lease immediately. I waited. I watched. I measured how I felt each time he asked me to order takeout because he forgot his wallet, or when I paid another repair bill while he nodded absently in the background, distracted by his phone. I tracked my growing resentment like monitoring a slow fever, and I realized it was not going down. So I signed. I chose a move-in date 3 weeks after his family's next dinner. I did not plan it that way consciously, but maybe some part of me knew the facade would crack soon. Maybe some part of me knew I was approaching the moment when I would stop asking for something different and start acting like I deserved it. I arranged time off work, not to quit, but to request flexibility for personal transitions. My boss did not ask for details. She just nodded and said, "About time." I did not tell my friends yet. I wanted it to feel real before anyone else put their interpretation on it. The last thing I needed was someone asking, "Are you sure you're not overreacting?" I had spent 5 years being unsure about my own feelings. I hired movers for early morning. I arranged a small storage unit. I scheduled utility transfers for everything in my name. Gas, electricity, water, internet. I wrote out a detailed inventory of what I would take and what I would leave behind. I did not want arguments later. I did not want chaos. Every item was accounted for. Every decision was deliberate. Every step was documented. And then I waited. I waited for the final moment that would make staying impossible. I did not know it would happen like that. I did not know he would use a room full of his relatives to mock me publicly. I did not know I would become the punchline in my own life story. But when it happened, I did not panic. I watched. I memorized every smirk, every careless glance around the table. I filed it away, like the last piece of evidence I needed. By then, I already knew exactly what I would do the next morning. I would wake up before dawn. I would pack the final few bags I had hidden under the bed. I would let the movers in and walk them through the house, room by room. I would take only what was legally and morally mine, down to the last fork. I would change the locks. I would leave a folder on the counter, documents, receipts, a copy of the deed, an itemized list of everything left behind. He would come home to absence, not a fight, not a dramatic note, just absence. I would not block his number. I wanted him to call, to text, to realize what had happened, not out of cruelty, but because he needed to understand what happens when someone you have taken for granted finally stops waiting. I did not hate him. I still do not. But I hated what I had allowed myself to become. And I was done pretending I did not see it. The morning after the dinner, I woke before my alarm. Not groggy, not disoriented, just awake. The kind of clarity that leaves no room for dreams or doubt. I stared at the ceiling for a moment, then rolled out of bed and put both feet on the floor like I was stepping into something irreversible. He was still asleep, sprawled diagonally across the mattress, mouth slightly open, one arm hanging over the side like he did not have a care in the world. That used to make me smile. Now it just looked like someone occupying space he had never earned. I moved quietly, but not from guilt, from efficiency. The bags I had packed days earlier were still hidden under the guest bed, zipped and ready. I took them out one by one and lined them by the front door. I folded the throw blankets from the couch. I unplugged the lamp in the corner. I emptied the drawer that held my chargers, notebooks, and important papers. Everything I touched I had already decided on weeks ago. There was no hesitation. No. Should I leave this? It was all itemized, all mine. I did not take a single thing that did not belong to me. Not a sock, not a coffee mug. That was crucial. This was not revenge. This was resolution. The movers arrived at 6:45 a.m. exactly as scheduled. 2 men and a woman. Polite and efficient. I greeted them with what probably looked more like exhaustion than a smile. "Everything marked with blue tape comes with me," I said, showing them the simple map I had drawn of the house. Every room had been categorized, every object sorted. The movers barely needed to ask questions. They moved like people accustomed to cleaning up after other people's endings. While they worked, I had the locks changed. I had scheduled a locksmith for 7:30 a.m. He arrived early, probably used to these kinds of jobs. He did not ask questions when I handed him the old keys and pointed to the door. By 8 a.m., the house was mine, in every legal sense. I left his belongings in the guest room, folded, organized, and clearly labeled. I was not cruel. I did not dump them in bags or hide anything out of spite. I wanted no reason for him to claim I had been irrational or emotional. Every item he legitimately owned was waiting for him, untouched and accounted for. I left a folder on the kitchen counter. Inside were photocopies of the deed mortgage statements and the original purchase agreement. I included a letter. Not an explanation, not a goodbye, just facts. A line-by-line list of what I had taken, what I had left, and contact information if he needed anything retrieved later. I signed it with my full name like a business transaction. I did not leave my new address. At 9:12 a.m., I closed the front door behind me and walked to my car. The sun had just crested over the neighborhood rooftops. The street was quiet except for the distant sound of someone starting their morning routine. My phone buzzed. A text from the leasing office at my new apartment. The keys were ready for pickup. I pulled out of the driveway for the last time, glanced once in the rearview mirror, and felt nothing. Not sadness, not relief, just completion. I did not cry when I reached the new apartment. The space was smaller, simpler, still unfurnished, but it felt expansive in a way that surprised me, like a room where I could finally hear my own thoughts without interference. I placed my bags against the wall and sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, watching sunlight spill through the clean windows. It felt honest, plain, warm, mine. He did not call right away. That surprised me. I expected a text within the hour. Some version of, "Where are you?" or "What the hell is this?" But the silence stretched through the morning. I imagined him waking, slowly shuffling into the kitchen, expecting coffee and conversation, then realizing something was off. No sounds. No bag by the door. No routine to fall into. I imagined the slow panic rising as reality dawned. When he finally called that afternoon, I let it ring. Then he called again. Then came a text. "Where are you?" What is this? Another call. Then another text. "Are you seriously doing this like a damn thief in the night?" I turned the phone face down and opened a box labeled Kitchen Essentials. I started putting dishes away in my new cabinets. More texts followed over the next few hours. The tone shifted quickly. Confusion to annoyance, annoyance to sarcasm, sarcasm to indignation. The same man who told a room full of people that I was a cow not worth buying was now accusing me of being dramatic, of making things harder than they needed to be. I did not reply. I did not owe him my attention anymore. Not my explanations, not my emotional labor. He did not get to act confused now. I had been communicating for years, just not in words he had bothered to hear. By evening, the messages took a different turn. He started bargaining, We should talk. This doesn't feel like you. You're overreacting. Let's be adults about this. Let me explain. You don't just leave like this. But I did just leave, and it felt exactly like me. Maybe for the first time in years. That night I made pasta in a borrowed pot. I ate sitting on the floor. I drank water from a mason jar, and I felt more satisfied than I had in months. The next morning I woke up in a room where everything belonged to me, even the silence. I checked my phone. 5 missed calls. 1 voicemail. His voice sounded tired and smaller than usual, saying my name like it carried weight, asking me to just come home. But I was home, and I had no intention of going back. He did not show up that first day, which half surprised me. I expected the kind of dramatic, wrinkled shirt confrontation he usually reserved for poor customer service or parking tickets. But he did not come. Maybe he did not know where to look. Maybe he was still convincing himself this was just anger, that I would walk back through the door and laugh it off, like all the other times I had swallowed my needs to keep the peace. But I had nothing left to swallow. The silence only lasted 24 hours. The next evening, the messages turned frantic. You're not answering. Are you okay? Where the hell are you? This isn't funny anymore. You took things that aren't yours. That's theft. You realize that, right? That last one made me laugh out loud. In my little kitchen, with its empty drawers and smell of fresh paint, I laughed so hard I had to sit down. I had not taken his things. By day 3, he started calling from different numbers. He even created a new email address, as if I would not recognize the tone. A mixture of guilt, false concern, and passive threats. My favorite was, I know you're probably going through something. I get it. Just don't do anything irreversible. We can fix this. As if I had broken something fragile and precious, not escaped from a system built entirely around my labor. Then came the calls to mutual friends. The indirect messages filtered through people who had not spoken to me in months, suddenly sliding into my inbox. He's really worried. Maybe you should just meet him for closure. Closure was a word people used when they did not want to admit there was nothing left to close. I did not reply to them either. But the real unraveling did not start until he went back to the house. I do not know exactly what he expected to find. Maybe an angry note, some trail of petty destruction, something he could use to play the victim. What he found instead was order, silence, a folder on the counter with documents he could not dispute, and a list of his belongings neatly accounted for. That was when the careful facade cracked. The tone of his text changed completely. No more manipulation, no more false sweetness. You really think you can do this without consequences? You're not better than me. You just had better credit. You're a coward. A manipulative, heartless coward. Then, silence again. Then the calls to his family began. Apparently the same people who had laughed at his joke, the milk and cow and grazing, did not find it quite so amusing once the fallout arrived at their doorstep. His sister reached out first. A single message. You could have at least warned us. Warn them of what? That I was not going to keep being their unpaid domestic help, with no title, no respect, and no seat at their table. He must have spun them some version where I abandoned him, where I overreacted, where I left without warning. But they knew. All of them knew. They had seen it in the way he spoke to me, in the way he dismissed my words, in the way he showed up empty-handed to every family event while I brought the dessert, the wine, and the polite smile that held everything together. They knew. They just did not care until the house was no longer available for him to host in. He went back a second time with his brother to collect the rest of his belongings. I was not there, obviously. I had arranged everything through a third-party company that verified the pickup. I left behind only what legally belonged to him: clothes, electronics, items with receipts in his name. Still, he tried to claim things that were not his. The coffee table, the bedroom mirror, the wireless speakers, a floor lamp I had bought with my first bonus 3 years earlier. When the company refused to release those items, he threatened legal action. They asked for proof of purchase. He had none. Then came the voicemail that showed me exactly who he really was. His voice, angrier this time, strained and righteous, rattled through the speaker like a rehearsed speech. You made a huge mistake. You think this makes you look strong? It makes you look bitter, selfish. No one's going to side with you when they find out what you really did. You walked away from something good, from someone who loved you. But love without respect is not love. It is convenience. It is habit. I deleted the message and turned off my phone for the rest of the day. That night, I took a walk through my new neighborhood. The air smelled like damp leaves and faint cigarette smoke. I passed a small park, quiet, except for the sound of someone dribbling a basketball in the distance. No one knew me there. No one expected anything from me. For the first time in years, I was not performing a role. Not being the supportive girlfriend. Not being the one who held everything together. Not being the reasonable one. I was just myself. I was not sad. I was not proud. I was free. He kept spiraling for weeks after that. More texts, empty threats, the occasional plea wrapped in anger. Just talk to me. You owe me that much. But I did not owe him anything. He had years to listen. Years to meet me halfway. Years to build something real with me. He chose comfort over commitment. Convenience over growth. Now, for the first time, he was living with the consequences of his own choices. I was not the milk. I was not the cow. I was not grazing in anyone's pasture. I had been feeding him a complete life every single day, and now finally, he was starving. He did not stop trying, even after all the calls, emails, and failed property claims. Not after the locksmith. Not after the legal silence. About a month after I left, a mutual acquaintance reached out, someone I had not spoken to in almost a year. Someone who had always played neutral, floating between social circles like Switzerland in human form. She asked if I would consider sitting down just once to talk. Not to reconcile. Not to make up. Just to clear the air. At first I almost deleted the message, but something about the phrasing stuck with me. To set the record straight. That was exactly what she wrote. And maybe that was what I wanted too. Not closure. Clarity. I agreed. On my terms. Public place. Neutral ground. Mid-afternoon. I gave the time, the location, and the boundaries. 1 hour. One conversation. Nothing more. He showed up 5 minutes late, wearing the same jacket he had worn the night he made the joke. I noticed immediately. I wondered if it was intentional. An attempt to trigger something familiar. To rewind the clock. If it was, it did not work. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, just diminished. Like someone who had not been sleeping well. Someone who had spent weeks realizing too late that he was not nearly as indispensable as he had assumed. He did not smile. He did not start with small talk. He sat down across from me at the cafe table and leaned forward like he was expecting a fight. I did not give him one. I just want to understand, he said finally, why you had to make it so dramatic. That was his word. Dramatic. I did not flinch. I had come prepared. Not emotionally, but with documentation. I opened the folder I had brought and slid it across the table. Inside were copies of everything. The mortgage, the title, all utilities in my name, receipts for furniture services, maintenance, and repairs. Every expense categorized by date and amount. I had screenshots of texts where I had offered to include him in financial decisions, to discuss balance, to share responsibility fairly. I did not say a word while he looked through it. I just watched. He flipped through the pages slowly, slower than I expected. At one point he looked up like he was about to argue, but the words died in his throat. There was nothing to dispute. Every line was documented. When he finally closed the folder, his expression had shifted. Less defensive. More confused. You really kept track of all this? I had to, I said. Because I knew eventually you'd try to rewrite history. He leaned back, arms crossed. It wasn't that one-sided. I did not respond immediately. I let the silence sit there between us until he had to squirm under it. You didn't think it was one-sided, I said. Because it worked for you. He opened his mouth again. Then he shut it. For the first time, maybe ever, he did not have a comeback ready. The conversation moved slowly after that. He asked questions that were not really questions. Statements wrapped in denial. I thought we were happy. You thought I was happy. I corrected. I didn't think you'd just disappear. I didn't disappear. I removed myself from an unbalanced situation. You could have talked to me first. I did. For 5 years. Every answer was calm, controlled, detached. I did not need to raise my voice. The facts were louder than anything I could say. Eventually, he shifted tactics. You know I loved you. No, I said. You loved what I provided. You loved the version of me that asked for nothing in return. That landed harder than I expected. He blinked and looked away. For a moment, I thought he might actually apologize. Not performatively, not to win points, but genuinely. Instead, he said, You embarrassed me in front of everyone. I felt something that might have been a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. Not a kind one. I humiliated you. I asked, leaning in slightly. You did that yourself. I didn't make the joke. I didn't laugh. I didn't call myself a cow and you too smart to pay. That was all you. I just decided not to stay in the pasture you put me in. He went quiet after that. Really quiet. The server came by. He did not order anything. I paid for my coffee out of habit, not spite, and stood to leave. I did not say goodbye. I did not need to. I left him sitting there with a folder full of proof and a silence full of consequences. The conversation had not been about healing. It had been about reflection, about setting the weight of truth down in the middle of the table and walking away lighter. Later that evening, I got a message from someone in his family. I do not know who gave them my number, but it was not hard to guess. The tone was accusatory. You blindsided him. You made him look like a fool. He made himself look like a fool. I saved the message and filed it with the rest. A reminder that some people confuse enabling with loyalty, that they would rather defend a son, a brother, a friend, even when the evidence contradicted their story, than face uncomfortable truths about how little he actually contributed. But I was not interested in making anyone understand anymore. I had said what needed saying, and finally, I did not care if they heard it. The pickup was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. He did not want to go through the company I had used before. He said it was too formal, like I was treating him like a stranger. I almost reminded him that strangers tend to treat each other with more basic respect than we had by the end, but I kept that observation to myself. No energy left for arguments that only existed to preserve his ego. Instead, I let him choose how it would happen, within strict limits. I agreed to be present for the collection of his remaining belongings. A short, final interaction. Supervised. Documented. 1 hour. Maximum. I was not nervous. Just ready. There was a sense of ceremony to it. Almost clinical. Like returning keys to a landlord after moving out. Not sad. Not angry. Just complete. He arrived 10 minutes late, naturally. Same car. Same posture. As if he thought maybe I would soften when I saw him. Like the sight of his familiar hands in his pockets, his practiced slouch might trigger some old reflex of care. It did not. I was past reflexes. I stood in the front hallway while he stepped inside. He looked around like a tourist visiting a place he used to know. His eyes moved slowly across the empty rooms. The couch was gone. The bookshelves were bare. Even the curtains had been replaced. He looked unsettled, like the house had already erased him. It had. I pointed toward the guest room, where I had placed everything he still had any claim to. I had grouped it all together methodically. Folded, boxed, labeled with his name. It looked impersonal, temporary. Like a life reduced to a few containers and bags. He did not thank me. Instead, he wandered, peering into other rooms, almost as if he hoped to find something I had missed. He lingered near the bedroom door and glanced at the walls where we used to keep framed photos. The nail holes were still there. The frames were not. "This feels surreal," he said finally. I did not respond. I had nothing left to narrate for him. He had already written the ending himself. He opened a box marked personal items, then one labeled electronics. Then he got to the stack of smaller things. Bathroom supplies, kitchen gadgets, old charging cables he barely used. That was where the problem started. "Where's my Bluetooth speaker?" "Purchased by me," I replied. "Receipt in my name. It's not on the approved list." He looked at me like he expected me to cave to make an exception. I did not blink. "And the cast iron skillet. Gift from my sister 3 years ago. Not yours," he scoffed. "You're really going to keep cookware like it's treasure?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm keeping what belongs to me." He went quiet again, but I could see the frustration building. Not because he actually cared about the speaker or the skillet, but because he was realizing how little of our shared space had ever actually belonged to him. It kept happening, one item after another. Things he assumed were his. Things he had used, treated as communal property. Denied. Not because I was being spiteful, but because they were never his to begin with. "You really documented everything," he muttered, flipping through the itemized list I had printed and attached to the final box. I did not respond. He knew I had. That was the part he could not reconcile. That I had done this work. All of it. Right down to the final inventory. That I had been prepared in ways he had never thought necessary. He sat on the edge of the now bare guest bed and rubbed his jaw. "Feels like I don't have anything left." I did not say it, but I thought it. "You never built anything to begin with." He looked up, eyes tired. "What am I supposed to do now?" It was not really a question. It was a confession. That was when I saw it fully. The hollow space behind all that bluster. The man who had drifted through 5 years of someone else's effort and now had nothing to show for it but bags of clothes and toiletries and Ziploc bags. He started asking about things he could not take. The wall-mounted TV, the dining chairs, the area rug in the living room. All of them were mine. I had invoices, credit card statements, email receipts. "I remember picking this rug out with you," he said. "Yes," I replied, "and then I paid for it." "You said you'd send me your half." "You never did." He stared at it for a long time. "It still feels like part of me." "It's not. Not anymore." He did not argue further. I think deep down he knew. He just had not expected to see it laid out so plainly that after years of talking like a co-owner, he was leaving with only what he had brought in. Less even. When the hour was up, I walked him to the door. He paused there, looking back one last time, like the house might say something on his behalf. But houses do not lie. They hold what you give them, and he had given this one nothing. He picked up the last box and stepped outside. "Guess that's it," he said, forcing a half smile. "It was always going to be," I said. "You just didn't want to believe it." He stood there a moment longer, as if waiting for a hug or a shared memory, or maybe one last gift of understanding. I gave him nothing. I closed the door, locked it. On the other side, I heard the sound of cardboard scraping against the porch railing. A frustrated sigh. Then footsteps. Then silence. I walked back inside and looked around the empty rooms. It was not just a house anymore. It was a space that had finally exhaled. The letter came 2 weeks later. Not from him. He had stopped texting by then, at least directly. This was from a law office. The envelope was thick and official-looking, with a return address in a part of town I recognized immediately. His family's area. Established money. Older influence. A name I did not recognize was printed in elegant script above the firm's logo. But I did not need to know the lawyer's name to guess who had paid the retainer. Inside, the tone was almost comical in its formality. Legal jargon stacked on legal jargon. Sentences bloated with hereby and whereas, attempting to create weight out of air. They claimed shared occupancy rights. Contributions in kind. And my personal favorite, implied co-ownership through extended domestic partnership. I laughed. It was not bitter, just tired. The kind of laugh you let out when you have already done all the homework and someone else is just now realizing you were not bluffing. They were trying to establish grounds for a case, not for actual ownership, but for leverage. They hoped I would be intimidated enough to compromise, to settle, to give back something that had never been theirs to begin with. I read each page carefully. I highlighted every phrase that attempted to twist my 5 years of investment into a shared achievement. Then I pulled up my files, the folder I had maintained meticulously. I printed copies, mortgage documents, utility bills, every receipt, screenshots of text messages where I had offered to add him to the deed, and his replies were always evasive. "Let's talk later." Not a good time. No rush, right? Messages where he acknowledged he had not paid me back for various expenses. Notes from our realtor clearly stating I was the sole applicant and qualified borrower. Then I called my lawyer. He was not surprised. "Families like his always try this," he said, flipping through the threatening letter. "They don't like losing face. They'll frame economic reality as injustice just to avoid admitting it was irresponsibility." I let him handle the response. It was short, precise, and legally airtight. A line-by-line rebuttal attached with all necessary documentation, including a signed declaration from me affirming that all cohabitation had been informal, uncontracted, and supported entirely by my income and assets. We sent it out that same week. I requested delivery confirmation. It came back the next morning. After that, the tone shifted dramatically. They tried again, this time with less legal posturing and more emotional manipulation. Another letter arrived. This one handwritten, from his mother. I recognized the heavy cursive, the scent of her floral perfume pressed into the paper. She said she was deeply saddened by how things had turned out, that a house was not worth this much damage to relationships, that family should come before paperwork. Family. As if I had ever truly been part of theirs. I did not respond. A few days later, another letter arrived. This one was unsigned. No return address. A single sentence was scrawled in messy pen across torn notebook paper. "You'll regret this when you're old and alone." That one did not make me laugh. Not because it hurt, but because it was so predictable. The oldest threat in the book. As if loneliness were the worst fate a woman could suffer. As if being partnered with someone who slowly drains you is preferable to sleeping peacefully in a room you pay for yourself. I kept the note and filed it with the rest. Let them accumulate, like museum pieces. Evidence of what people become when you stop allowing them to feed off your silence. For a moment, I wondered if he would try showing up at my door again, if he would appear with some mixture of rage and desperation, demanding answers or access. But he never did. Maybe someone warned him. Maybe he finally understood what it meant to stand on legal ground with nothing solid beneath his feet. I never doubted the case would collapse. There was no legal standing, no history of financial contribution, no documented co-ownership, just entitlement dressed up in family letterhead and second-hand threats. The lawyer called 2 weeks after our response. "It's done," he said. "They've dropped everything. No counter-arguments, no follow-up." "Of course they did," I said. "They never had a case. Just a story." He paused, then added, "If you ever need a restraining order filed, let me know. I've seen these situations turn bitter when the bluff fails completely." I thanked him and hung up. That night, I slept through the entire night for the first time in weeks. No pacing, no phone alerts, no rehearsed responses in my head for attacks that never came. Just quiet. Clean, whole, undisturbed quiet. When people say it is over, they usually mean emotionally. But this was different. This was the end of their reach. No more paperwork. No more veiled threats. No more pretending their opinions had any bearing on my actual life. He and his family could spin whatever story they needed to protect their pride. I would not hear it. I would not correct it. Let them choke on their revised version of events. The truth did not need defending anymore. It had already won. Selling the house was not an emotional decision. It was mathematical. Cold. Precise. Liberating mathematics. I had equity. I had value. And for the first time in a long time, I was the only one who would benefit from it. The idea started quietly, almost like idle curiosity. I was scrolling through real estate listings one evening, not searching for anything specific, just observing market trends. Then I saw a similar house 3 blocks away. Same floor plan, smaller yard, slightly outdated kitchen, listed for almost $90,000 more than what I had paid 3 years earlier. I blinked, saved the link, started running numbers in my head. The market had shifted significantly in my favor, and I was not emotionally tethered to the space anymore. Every room I walked through now echoed with clean detachment. I had already extracted the memories I wanted to keep. Everything else was just drywall and decisions. I called a realtor, someone I trusted. Someone outside the circle he used to pull social favors from. We met the following week. She walked through the place, slowly taking notes and photos. "You've maintained this beautifully," she said. "Excellent natural light, clean lines, smart improvements. You'll get offers, quick ones." I told her I was ready to move fast. I did not want to drag out the process. No elaborate staging, no emotional delays. Just clear pricing and the right buyer. Within 4 days of listing, I had 5 offers, all above asking price. That was when it really hit me. How long I had been sitting on something valuable while trapped in the belief that I could not move forward, that I had to stay and maintain and nurture a place that never truly gave back. I was not just selling a house. I was liquidating every sacrifice I had made. Every quiet night I had held things together alone. The final sale closed within 30 days. Clean transaction, no complications. No interference from anyone. When the check cleared, I stared at the number in my account for a long time. It was not life-changing money, but it was mine. Completely, unquestionably mine. I did not rush to spend it. I let it sit untouched for weeks, like a boundary I had drawn in the shape of a bank balance, proof that something solid could come from years of imbalance. Then I started making lists. Not lists of things I needed, things I had postponed. For years, I had told myself certain purchases could wait. A weekend trip to the coast, a new laptop, a photography workshop, a real mattress that did not feel like a compromise. I had always prioritized joint expenses, things we might both use, things he might benefit from. Now I thought only in singular terms. I booked a solo trip to a coastal town I had bookmarked years earlier, but never dared visit without him. I upgraded my workspace. I bought fresh linens, a pair of boots I used to admire through shop windows, and new cookware. Nothing extravagant, just mine. Every purchase felt deliberate, not indulgent, not impulsive, corrective. I even started a small project I had shelved indefinitely, something I used to sketch ideas for in old notebooks when I thought I had spare time. I will not describe it in detail. It is still growing, still fragile. But the point is, I made space for it again. Space I had once filled with someone else's priorities and problems. People around me noticed changes. Coworkers said I seemed lighter, Friends invited me out more often. One of them, someone who used to avoid bringing their partner around when I was still with him, said, "You seem more yourself lately." And I was. Not happier in some magical, dramatic way. Not transformed into a different person overnight. Just more present, more real. Less edited for someone else's comfort. Freedom did not look like champagne or revenge plots. It looked like grocery shopping without budgeting for someone else's expensive snacks. Like sleeping diagonally across a bed I had paid for. Like knowing that no one was quietly draining my energy in the background while I slept. He tried reaching out once more. An email this time. Short, polite, carefully worded. He said he had heard through mutual connections that I had sold the house. That he hoped everything worked out well. That he was glad things had turned out okay for me. As if he had been a neutral observer. As if he had watched our relationship from the sidelines instead of living inside it. I did not reply. What was there to say? That I was thriving despite his years of passive consumption. That I had spent half a decade building a life he coasted through, and now I was finally building one for myself. Alone. Number. The best response was no response at all. Let him imagine. Let him guess. Let him wonder. Let him sit with the silence he once mistook for compliance. The truth was elegantly simple. I had monetized what was mine. I had converted the very thing he took for granted into a path forward. I had capitalized on the foundation he believed would always be there waiting for him. And every time I opened my banking app, every time I added to my savings, every time I funded something that brought me genuine satisfaction, I remembered that joke. Why pay for the cow? He thought he was being clever. He did not realize I owned the entire pasture. It has been 8 months now. Long enough for people to stop asking careful questions. Long enough for the silence to settle into something comfortable. Long enough for my life to feel like it never had his fingerprints on it at all. The apartment is still compact, still quiet, but I have made it mine in every way that matters. The walls are lined with books I actually read. The kitchen smells like garlic and fresh herbs most evenings. The plants on the windowsill are not only alive, but thriving. I named them after concepts I no longer practice. Patience, apology, compromise. The dog lives with me, of course. He came without question, tail wagging, no loyalty conflicts. I think he adjusted faster than I did. Sometimes he still perks up when he hears footsteps in the hallway, then realizes it is no one we know. Then he goes right back to his nap, the way I do now. I wake up in peace, not out of obligation. Not to carry someone else's emotional weight, just because I am rested and ready. I stopped checking his social media around month 4. Before that, I glanced occasionally. Curious, not longing. But every post felt like performance art. Gym selfies, memes about loyalty and authenticity, vague quotes about growth and learning from difficult experiences. Always carefully curated to suggest he was doing fine, that he was unbothered, that he had somehow been the victim of someone cold calculating and ungrateful. His family never posted about me. They never had. It was easier, I'm sure, to pretend I had been just a phase, a girl who overreacted to a harmless joke, a name best left in the past tense. But I know what happened. So do they. Because the thing about silence is that it does not erase facts. It just sits with them. I heard from a mutual contact, someone who does not take sides but does not lie either, that he is back living at his childhood home. In his old bedroom, same bedspread from high school, same carpet, working freelance projects, supposedly saving up, trying to get back on his feet, they said. But from where I stand, it looks more like trying to start over, without acknowledging he never learned to stand on his own the first time. He still tells people I blindsided him, still calls it a toxic situation. Still says I took everything. But I did not take everything. I left him exactly what was his. That is the part he cannot say out loud. Meanwhile, I have moved forward, not just physically, but in ways that do not translate to social media updates or dinner party stories. I have made new friends, reconnected with old ones who had quietly drifted away during the years I was too busy maintaining an unbalanced relationship. I even started dating again, slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. I am not looking to be rescued. I am not looking to fill a gap or fix someone else's problems. There is no gap. I never needed a partner to complete me. I only ever needed one who would not stand in my way. I have been building things again. Real things. Not based on fantasy or future promises, but substance. I have invested time in myself, in my work, in my voice, in projects that matter to me. And I have learned how to sit with myself without shrinking to make room for someone else. There are days when I still revisit the past, not to mourn, to verify, to remind myself that I was not wrong, that what happened was real, that I did not leave because I was weak or impatient, but because I finally understood that my strength did not need to be spent on someone who never appreciated it. Sometimes I reread the documentation I kept, not out of spite, not out of vindication, just confirmation, to remember how thoroughly I had prepared, how quietly I had built my exit strategy, how completely I had reclaimed what was mine. I think about the version of me who once believed love meant overextending, that devotion meant debt, that being chosen would eventually come if I just kept being useful enough. She is gone now. What is left is someone calmer, sharper, more deliberate about where I place my energy. I do not need to prove anything. Not to him, not to his family, not to anyone who watched it happen and said nothing. I do not need a redemption arc. I did not fall. I just woke up. And when I think back to that night at his family's table, the joke, the laughter, the wine in my hand that suddenly tasted like vinegar, I do not feel shame or regret. I feel gratitude, because that moment, humiliating as it was, cracked the illusion so cleanly that I could not repair it or ignore it. It was the final gift he did not mean to give me. The clarity I had been afraid to reach for, the permission to stop waiting. And now I do not need metaphors about milk cows or pastures. I am not something free to be consumed. I am not property to be owned or livestock to be managed. I am the deed. I am the title. I am the entire investment, and I do not graze in anyone's field.